Welcome to episode 420 of the Corner of Knit and Tea. My name is Laura, and I blog. Woo! I'm also known as Fluffy Kira on Instagram and Twitter. I blog over at thecornerofknitandtea.com, and that's where this episode and every episode show notes will be. Finally, I also have an Etsy shop called The Corner of Knit and Tea, where you can find my knitting patterns and hand-spun yarns. Wow, that was like I just started talking and my mind was a complete blank. And then I had to kind of fill in from memory because I've been doing this for 420 episodes, guys. It's been a long time. So hi, how are you? It is Monday, April 24th, and that extra little bit of time also gave me time to figure out what day it is. It's Monday, April 24th, and I am coming to you from the kind of south side of Kansas, the Kansas City metro area. I actually live on the Kansas side. I don't talk about that a lot, but that is where I am coming to you from. I hope that you are having a great day. It is a Monday afternoon, about 4:30 p.m. I have finished working for the day, and I wanted to sit down and have a quick chat with you about what I have been working on. So I hope that you are doing well, that you are staying healthy, and that you are finding some of your crafting mojo. This past week was really, really lovely. Not only did I get a bunch done at work, but on Friday afternoon I took some time off to attend the Ply Away convention and vendor market. I guess I didn't really attend the convention. I took no classes this year. Ply Away is a basically annual spinners conference put on by Ply Away magazine, run by JC Boggs Faulkner. I say yearly because, of course, with the pandemic, everything got a little bit off, but it started up again last year, and this is the final year, at least for now, in Kansas City. JC has announced that she will be doing next year in Portland, so I don't know for sure whether I will attend. For selfish reasons, it has been wonderful having it in Kansas City. It just means less travel expenses for me. I'm sure I will go again. I think she said that she was going to try and rotate it, kind of 1 year on the West Coast, 1 year in the middle, 1 year on the East Coast, and kind of have it be a moving show, which would be wonderful because it means that I could easily attend the years that's in the Midwest, and then I could potentially attend some of the years that it is not. So, whether or not I go next year will probably be determined by what classes she's offering and if they are of interest to me. This year, I did not attend any classes for two reasons. The first being that the class that I really, really, really wanted sold out right away. And so that was kind of the one that I really wanted. And I also knew around class registration that I would likely be in the middle of starting a new job. I'm only about 6 weeks into 6 weeks, 7 weeks, about 8 weeks. A little less than that, something like that. I'm not very far into my new job, and I didn't want to ask to take off a bunch of time, particularly because several of the classes were at different days. What I did do was I took a little time off on Friday afternoon and went with a friend to the vendor market, and that was fun, and I will share, I was very restrained, but I will share what I got there towards the end of the podcast. So that has been what I've been up to. Today I am drinking Downton Abbey tea. This is the Downton Estate blend. It is from Republic of Tea, and this is a classic Earl Grey black tea with vanilla. It comes in tea bags. I should say I drink a mix between tea bags and loose leaf tea. I've talked about this way in the past, but so the difference between loose leaf tea and tea in tea bags is that loose leaf tea kind of takes the finest parts of the tea, the largest whole leaves, and then they put the smallest pieces of leaves and some of the dust into tea bags. So there's nothing wrong with tea bags, but they do contain slightly less bits of the leaves, and like I said, they do contain some dust, so they're usually not as great for making multiple cups of tea, whereas with loose leaf tea you can brew multiple cups from the same serving. So I do buy a lot of loose leaf teas. I do like to drink tea that way, but I also don't have a problem with tea bags. I mean, there is a little bit less waste when you buy loose leaf because you don't have the paper tea bags, but on the other hand, a lot of places use recycled paper at this point. I know Republic of Tea uses recycled paper for their filters, so I'm not super concerned about that, and I believe the Downton Estate ones were not available as whole tea leaves. They were only available to purchase in packets. So that is what I'm drinking today, and I'm drinking it in my Naughty Birds mug, which has true names of a bunch of birds, but they sound a little bit naughty, and there actually is even one at the bottom of the cup, and this was sent to me by a friend. So this is a good strong black tea. Sorry, it is Earl Grey with a little bit of vanilla, if I did not say that earlier, and so I like it. It's a good afternoon tea. I kind of tend to keep my herbals for in the evenings so that I don't drink too much caffeine before I go to bed. So let's talk about what's been crafty this week. The first thing is that I finished the shawl that I was working on. This is the Scrap Shawl by Jackie Verbeek. Unfortunately, it's only available on Ravelry, but it is a fairly standard shawl recipe. By recipe, I mean you cast on 3 stitches, and then working a knit one front and back, you increase every other row. So you are creating an asymmetrical triangle where you're only increasing on one side of the shawl, only on the right side rows, and that's pretty much it. So this shawl, technically the way she writes the shawl, she writes it out as a recipe, and then she says what she used. She opted to use, the designer being Jackie, opted to knit hers with sort of a, I've been calling it a half brioche because you're only brioching on one side, and so she opted to use basically a slip-one yarn over when you're on the back side, and then on the front side just a straight knit all the way across. So that is what I have done here, and you can see again that we start in the top corner. And brioche creates these kind of lines or columns where you can see the knit stitches, and then in between you can see kind of the netting that is created by your slipping a stitch with your yarn overs, and it is beautiful and it is finished. Normally if you're working in like 2-row brioche, then the pattern normally is reversible, but as you can see this is not, because on one side it is just all kind of purl bumps. So, or it appears like purl bumps. There's actually no purling in this shawl. So I started with a gradient from Zen Yarn Garden. This is a sample for them. And let's see what I've got here, if I've got the right tags here. Nope, that's the wrong tag. Sure is. Okay, so the base that I'm using is Superfine Glitter. It is 90% Superfine Superwash Merino, 10% Sparkling Nylon, which is Stellina. And I knit it in 2 colorways. The first is the 400 yard put up, which is 100 gram skein, and it is in the natural colorway. And so I have a little bit left of my second cake. This took 2 cakes, and so this is what I have left. And you probably can't see the sparkle a ton because it's really hard to see on the natural. There is a bit of sparkle there. You can definitely see it in person, but it's not super obnoxious. So it's not like you're going to be super, super blingy. The second thing that I used was a blank, which is basically yarn that has sort of been machine knit into a loose basically stockinette scarf formation. It's just a wide swath of stockinette stitch, and they dye that into gradients, and so it is dyed at one end purple, then into red, into orange at the center, and then it goes back out into red and purple again. And of that blank, this is all I have left. You can see a little bit of the sparkle on there, but it is just about 2 or 3 rows of the purple. I stopped a little bit sooner. I probably could have gotten 1 or 2 more rows out of this in my shawl, but I stopped a little bit sooner because I didn't want to run out on the binding. But this is literally all I've got left. So the you can see it was of a certain width, and I just knit off of it, which produces sort of a thread that looks a little bit like ramen, but you can knit with it anyway, and it's really not a problem. So the finished shawl, and this has not been blocked yet. I still need to, I'm still deciding whether I'm just going to steam it or whether I'm actually going to give it a full wet block. Brioche tends to open up quite a bit. I'll probably give it a full wet block just because eventually anyone who makes this shawl would probably have to give it a full wet block if it got dirty at any point, rather than just steaming it to kind of open it up. So again, as I said, it starts in purple and we move into red, and then we move into orange, and then back out into red and purple. And of course the sections are much wider up at the top end because we have fewer stitches across, but it is a perfect gradient. So you end up with kind of a purple edge. And the bind off is nothing special. It is just a straight bind off, which is what I did. It might curl just a little bit at the edge. I'm not sure. We'll have to see when I block it. Because this isn't straight stockinette, this is This is a little bit of kind of what I'm calling half brioche. I don't think it's going to roll as much as it would on a plain stockinette. If you decide to knit this in stockinette, you could easily do a garter border, or you could do a slightly different bind off. Again, this is really very much of a recipe. The pattern calls for a little bit less yarn than I've used, I think. Well, okay, the pattern calls to be knit in 3 strands held together of scraps, and it's called the Sun Scrap Shawl because the idea is that you can work through your different scraps, and much the way Stephen West's moraling projects go, you can make all kinds of fun patterns using just little bits and bobs left over of fingering weight. Because I knit it with a gradient and the neutral color, I opted to only hold 2 strands together at once. However, my gradient skein, or my gradient blank, was 170 grams and 680 yards. So what I did is I basically knit almost the entirety of that, except for just a couple yards here at the end. And so what I did is I used 170 grams of the the natural along with it, and I just stopped at the end of the gradient. I think it calls for slightly less yardage. It might only call for 1,200 yards, and when you knit that together in 3 strands at a time, that's only going to give you a shawl that is approximately the size of 400 yards, because obviously you're holding them together. However, the shawl recommends using a US 9, and I actually went down one to a US 8, but I think you could probably even get away using a US 10 or 11, because even though you're using fingering weight, well, maybe not, because brioche will loosen up, but if you're using 3 strands together, that's going to be somewhere between a worsted and a bulky weight, so you are going to want to use a decent sized needle, or else it's just going to be really tight and hard to knit. So I used a US 8, which I said it was 1 size down from what the pattern called for. I selected that because I was holding 2 strands together, so I decided that would be better. I don't know the exact measurements of the finished shawl because, again, I'm going to block it, but this shawl is my arm's width across the top, and it is probably approximately about, oh gosh, I don't know, maybe 2 feet at the center, maybe more, kind of down to the center point. Again, it's an asymmetrical triangle, so it's not exactly the perfect triangle, but it could easily be worn around the back, or it could be worn around the front for a lot of warmth. This is really bulky and really cozy and really warm, and I think it's fun. Again, you could also do this with whatever you have in stash. We just decided to do it as a sample with the gradient, and I don't know if I hold it up close if you can see the sparkles. You can definitely see them in person. I just don't know that they show up that much. It is interesting. The white definitely toned down the gradient some, and I am a dark and saturated gradient person, so I actually kind of prefer the gradient on its own, but it isn't actually pastel. I don't know if the screen makes it seem like that. It really isn't. You can still see the colors, and up close to the naked eye you can see the subtle variation in colors, because each section is slightly variegated. There's some difference in the tonality of it. So that is the Sun Scrap Shawl by Jackie Verbeek, and again, I knit that as a sample for Zen Yarn Garden. I do have another shawl sample to start for Zen Yarn Garden, but I'm probably not going to start it until this upcoming weekend because I have a few other things I would like to get through. So that kind of concludes the Zen Yarn Garden portion of this podcast. I wanted to finish the first sleeve for my Weatherell sweater, and I did not get there this week because I had a new chicken project to work on, and I just brought it to show you because I thought you might find it interesting. So I knit various hand-spun yarns for the City Girl Farm, who I work for as kind of an independent contractor, and I often do not spin the yarns because we use kind of thick and thin hand-spun yarns, and I am not the best at that. I really, I'm a short forward draw spinner, which means I spin very worsted. I try to spin really smooth fibers, and my spinning style, particularly for everything that goes in my shop, is to have it be as consistent as possible. And so thick and thin just hasn't been in my vocabulary very well. And so for the most part, I knit what other people spin, and I thought this one was just a really fun one this week. So basically they've taken bits and bobs of all kinds of colors and mixed it with a white natural, and so I am turning it into something that will cover a chicken footstool. So we've got some orange and some green and red, and then predominantly some navy and some black. But there's also purple, and there's a little bit of fun blue in there. And honestly, with these, this is mostly just garter stitch knitting, but it is super fun to knit just until the next color and find out what color it is. So I really have fun with these, and these turn into really fun chickens. I will drop a link in the show notes about where you can see some of the chickens that we make, what they actually look like when we're done with them. And so if that's interesting to you, you can see that. Again, I'm just a contract knitter for them. I go pick up stuff and take it home and turn it into stuff and take it back and go pick up more yarn. So it's just an ongoing process. But I thought, and sometimes a lot of the chickens that I work on lately are either plain white or white and brown, which is not super exciting to share, but I like to share the colorful ones with you because I think they're fun. So, I don't have anything else in the realm of knitting this week. I do, I'm thinking part of what I'm going to do while I take a quick break from sample knitting this week is I might try and crank out the baby sweater, and then I also might try and finish that sleeve and start on the second sleeve. So I am working on a sweater for myself. It is called Weatherell by Kiyomi Burgeon, and I will talk about that next week when hopefully I bring a finished sleeve and then start on the second sleeve. It is a sweater that is knit from the bottom up, and it has you start with the sleeves, so that's where I'm at right now, which is why it doesn't sound very exciting, because for the most part I'm just knitting a plain stockinette sleeve. There is a little bit of color work at the cuff, and then the fun part will be when I get to the yoke, but the sweater is designed from bottom up, so you knit the sleeves first from the cuff all the way up to where they'll join at the yoke, and then you knit the body from the bottom all the way up to where it will join at the yoke, and then you join them together, and then you get to do all the fun color work. So it's going to be a little while before that one is really fun to look at, but I'm going to continue to sort of work on it when I can. The baby sweater that I'm going to knit is Baby Vertebrae. I talked about it quite a bit last week, and I have wound the yarn and I am ready to cast on, so maybe I will work on that a little bit this evening. So let's talk about spinning, and then I will show you briefly what I got at Ply Away, which also might influence my cast-ons this week, and then I will let you go. So this week I finished up a braid. Sadly, I did not have time to ply it, and you can see that I am really not even when I spin singles on my bobbins. This was a braid from Koomase, which is Koomasee on Etsy, and she does really, really lovely braids on really some great fibers to work with. This one is on Corriedale. This one is on Corriedale. I bought it because I thought it would make really nice socks, and it is in a variety of purples. So you can see some lavender and some kind of crocus or lilac color. You can see kind of the dark, really violet purple here, and then there's also some kind of plummy, more reddish fiber, and then there was also a decent amount of white in the braid. So these are basically ready to ply. I meant to ply them last night, but I just didn't end up getting back to it. So I will ply these together this week, and then this will probably go up in the shop midweek. I really like Corriedale for socks. It is not superwash, so it will potentially felt. But to me, Corriedale is really a great balance between super soft next to the skin. It's not quite super soft next to the skin, but it does have some of the feel of a little bit like a merino. So it is soft. It's one of the fibers. I have sensitive skin, and so I do find certain things sensitive around my neck and also particularly around my ankles. And let me tell you, you haven't lived until you've put on a pair of really warm, woolly, comfortable socks, and then an hour later had your ankles itching with the fire of 1,000 suns. Corriedale doesn't do that to me, and so Corriedale is soft enough like merino and doesn't really have any rough bits to it, but it is also a little bit sturdier than merino. Sometimes you see with merino you get a little bit of pilling depending on how you've spun it, because it is just a super soft and short staple length. Corriedale is just a little bit more, a little bit of a longer staple length, so it holds together a little bit better. It's a little bit sturdier. My Corriedale socks wear really, really well. They don't show their age. They don't felt a lot, and I feel like they're much sturdier than some of the super, super soft socks that, well, let's face it, we all like to pamper our feet and wear super soft, cushy socks. I find that these work better if I'm actually going to wear them in shoes and out of doors. So that is what I'm working on there. And then I pulled a new braid to spin this week because I will ply this up at some point, but I also definitely want to get started on a new braid. And the braid that I pulled is a club colorway from Hello Yarn, but do not fear, this is not a spoiler because it is from June 2022. It is Spine Tingler, or as they would say on the East Coast, Spine Tingla, with an AH at the end. And this is a real kind of a woodland colorway. I really like it. It's yellows and greens and russets and browns, and I can picture like forest or wooded land and maybe a little bit of a fox in there. It's just really a great colorway. And then it's got a few lighter bits, really kind of a light minty green and then kind of a light blue gray. And it's a really nice braid, and it is Polworth, which is very soft. It is a type of merino, and it is super soft. So I think this one will end up being lovely. And this will be for the shop, so I'm going to work on this one this week. And if this is a color that interests you, keep an eye out. So let's talk about Ply Away briefly. So I did go to Ply Away this year. It was held at the Westin, Kansas City, which is up near kind of the center of the city. And actually it was a little bit of a mess getting in and out. No fault to Ply Away, because Kansas City is hosting the NFL draft this coming weekend. And so they have started closing off roads. So it was a little bit of an ordeal to kind of get there and get in and get parking. But it was absolutely lovely. The market was probably just a skosh smaller than it has been in previous years. There were definitely a few vendors who I noticed were not there this year, but there were so many lovely vendors and a few new ones that I knew of but had not necessarily been able to shop for in person with. I went in with a list because I know myself and I tend to go a little bit overboard. And so what I really wanted to do was not buy very much unless I could come up with projects. I have a ton of single skeins in my stash. I have a ton of single braids in my stash. And single fiber braids are okay because I can spin them up for the shop and I enjoy that. I find it harder when I have single skeins in my stash to figure out what to do with them. I have so many shawls at this point that the idea of turning a single skein of pretty sock yarn into kind of a bandana shawlette, while lovely, is not something that I need. I have a bureau I basically have a chest of drawers that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. It's either 6 or 7 drawers tall, and it is completely full with knitwear. I only have my knitwear in there. I have a whole other dresser for my regular clothes. And I will say that I go through that dresser every year and I weed out the things that I have not worn, and I do take them and donate them to a local domestic violence shelter. But my point is that I have so many things that I need to find a way to buy for projects these days and to plan my projects in advance. So I went with a list of things, and I did not find certain things. For instance, it is time to think about knitting the kids' sweaters, and I figured if I actually found some superwash yarn that I wanted to use for their sweaters, that I would totally buy it there. So it's not like I went in with the idea that I didn't want to spend any money. I just went in with the idea that I wanted to buy more intentionally, so that I just didn't end up with lots of odds and ends. So I didn't find sweater quantities, so basically I only came home with 3 purchases, which is fine for me. I knew I was going to buy a few different braids, and that was fine. And then the one thing that I went there looking for in terms of yarn was, and in this case I bought a single skein, but the single skein is all I need for the project. So I have been knitting a rainbow of socks, and as you know, I finished the yellow socks I think 2 weeks ago now. I think this is the second podcast since I finished them. So I needed a skein of green yarn, and I was really excited to see Shirsty Cat Designs came to the market this time. And I will be honest, I don't remember if they have been before. I just know that I don't remember having gone in and shopped with them before, and I am aware of them because I have seen them interviewed on other podcasts that I watch. So this is Shirsty Cat Designs by Kelly Straub, and this is 100% superwash Blueface Leicester, 246 yards, 100 grams, and it is a DK weight, and it is called Heart of the Forest. And so it is a really fun, kind of a cross between a semi-solid and variegated. It's all greens, so it's definitely a tonal, but it's not all the same shade of green. We've got a little bit of like spring green and light green, a little bit of yellow green, a little bit of like a dark foresty green, a little bit of almost a tealy green here. So just all kinds of different greens. And my plan is, I'm super excited that this is superwash Blueface Leicester, because it means theoretically they can wash it in the washing machine. I know that's generally contraindicated. However, if I'm knitting socks, I certainly don't mind if it is superwash fiber and they may be able to wash it along with their other laundry. I am knitting socks for those who face housing challenges, and so my concern is that it fit them and be warm and comfortable and not shrink shrink up too much. And if they only wear them for a single season because that's all they can do, that is fine. Also, if they do not have access to be able to wash them regularly, they may only last a season anyway, and that is fine. I just want to knit something to keep their feet warm during a cold winter. So I'm going to wind this up and probably cast on for this weekend, but this was definitely a fun find, and I was glad that I went into the booth and got to sample a new to me dyer. And in this case, the single skein was okay, because what I'm going to do is I will wind this skein up, divide it exactly in half. I'll put it on my scale and divide it into 2 equal balls, and then I can knit 2 equal socks, and I will knit them as tall as I can, start at the toe up, and knit an adult size sock, and then I will be done with the green ones, and then it'll be time to think about the blue ones. But I think these will probably be my socks for May, since we're already at April 24th. They're not going to be done by April, but I will try and get into them this week. So the other 2 things that I bought were braids of fiber so that I could spin a little bit. And both of these actually are dyers that I have seen before and love. The first one is Apothecary Fabrications, or sometimes she's known, I believe her labels say Apothecary Fabrications, but I think her shop actually says Apothecary Luxury Fibers. She is semi-local to me. I believe she's somewhere in Missouri, and so I see her at a lot of the local fiber shows. My local yarn store also carries a lot of her yarn and occasionally some of her fiber. I have spun her fiber before, and it is gorgeous. And this is a Montana Corriedale, and it is dyed in the colorway, it does not say. So it is a colorway without a name, but it is grays and turquoise. And I was really in a teal mood. Not everything that I got is teal, but every braid that I gravitated towards was definitely teal. I just kept going for the teal braids over and over and over. And it was kind of we made one round of the market, and then in the second round, I decided what to purchase. And so this one was definitely on my list, but I limited myself so that I didn't come home with 25 teal braids. Because this is Corriedale, I thought this might make fun socks. I can't decide if they're going to be for me or for someone else. I don't have any socks really in this colorway or any hand spun in this colorway that I've turned into socks. So it might be for me, but I can't decide. It might go up in the shop. So we'll just wait and see. And when I get a wild hair to spin it, I will go ahead and do that. The second thing is also actually, I bought it for its sock spinning potential, and I don't know, again, whether they'll be mine or end up in the shop, one or the other. The second is a kit from Gritty Knits. It's called Sock Scraps. It is about 4 ounces of fiber, and it is a custom fiber in a BFL sock blend that is 43% BFL, 43% superwash BFL, and then 14% nylon. And a lot of people don't necessarily like nylon in their socks or don't necessarily like to work with superwash. I realize that superwash is not great for the environment, and so I don't always purchase it. I don't mind having it not be superwash. The reason that I was really interested in these is because there's 14% nylon in it, and yes, nylon is a plastic. I do understand that. It also helps socks wear really well. Just that little bit of a nylon in there really takes a sock that might blow out heels and toes after a little while and makes it really, really hard wearing. Anyway, so I was curious about this. It looks like a variety of different colorways dyed up in here. It looks like maybe 2, 3, 4 colorways in here. I can't tell exactly until I pull it out because it's lots of little bits of fiber in all different colors. I'm sorry for the bag. I'll try and get it so that it's not too much light. I do have a light on me there. That's not bad. And so it's dark grays and then some pops of pinks and yellows and greens and a little bit of turquoise down here, but I didn't hold that against. I didn't decide to exclude this one from my consideration just because it has a little bit of teal. It's got a bunch of other things in here. So again, this is BFL Scraps, Sock Scraps, and this will likely be a skein of sock yarn. Now, I should say that when I spin sock yarn, I am not a super thin spinner. So typically my sock yarn ends up at a most of my yarn ends up at a sport to DK weight. I end up usually with about 3 to 350 yards per skein on most skeins, and I find that that is enough for me to make a pair of hand spun socks, and I can actually get a decent length out of them. I do have small feet. My feet are size 6.5, so if you have large feet, it may not actually be enough for you to get a single pair of socks out of a single skein of hand spun. You could supplement with commercial yarn for the heels, toes, and cuffs. or you could just do some shorties. It just kind of depends on what you want to do, but generally I get 300 to 350 yards, which if I try and knit up the entire thing, I end up with knee socks, which means that even if you have size medium feet, you ought to be able to end up with socks that cover a significant portion of your calf. So those are the things that I bought. They are not the things that I'll be spinning up, otherwise you'll see them again. I generally don't do a lot of haul videos, but I just think sometimes when I go to a festival and get to try new to me vendors, that it's interesting to share a little bit of what I can pick up. So we are right around 30 minutes on the nose, which seems like the perfect podcast length. So I will say to you, I hope that you have a wonderful crafting week ahead, that you find something fun to make that tickles your fancy. I hope that you stay healthy. I hope that you are enjoying the season wherever you are. And until I see you next time, I will say happy knitting, happy spinning, happy sipping, and I'll see you next time. Bye.